Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. For the next hour, I'm going to pose a few questions to them, and then at the end, I'll open up for a couple from the audience. What I'd like to do is start from, excuse me, from left to right and give them each a chance to spend a minute to introduce themselves and their company. And what I would ask of the panelists is, since we have such a limited amount of time and we have 5 quality speakers up here, please make your responses crisp, clean, and short. All right. Roger, would you like to start, please? A little background on who you are and why you're up here.
Okay. Okay. I'm Roger Burkhardt. I'm the CEO of Ingress. And Ingress was formed as an open source company 3 years ago based on relational database technology that's actually much older than that, goes back to the start of relational technology. We've been recognized as the open source database that is ready for critical applications. We are used by over 14,000 commercial customers worldwide, many of them here in France and in Europe. We're also strong believers in innovation. We collaborate with the leading database researchers around the world, and recently announced, with the support of Intel, actually a breakthrough in database technology called Ingress VectorWise that provides about a 10 times improvement in performance and about a 90% reduction in hardware costs, which is a little magical if you think about it. The reason I mention that is I strongly believe that open source is not just about a better economic model, but also about a much better innovation model. And that was my personal experience of open source when I was on the customer side, running technology at the New York Stock Exchange. So we have strong roots here in Europe, lots of partnerships here, and we're delighted to be part of the conference for the 3rd year running.
Thank you, Roger. Patrice.
Thank you. I'm Patrice Bertrand. Hello, I'm one of the founders and today general manager of a company called Smile, that is the systems and open source solution integrator in France. Very likely the largest such player in the French market, with a little less than 300 persons in France, and presence in Spain, Switzerland, and Ukraine and Morocco as well. And we provide expertise on a very wide range of solutions, from systems and infrastructure to content management, document management, business intelligence, and ERP, and about everywhere where you can find mature solutions for enterprise-ready open source solutions, we are present.
Thank you. Francois?
Good morning. My name is François Méraud. I am the general manager for Talent. It's a French open source company. We deliver data integration, data quality, and master data management solutions. It refers to all kinds of applications as far as you have to move, transform, clean data. We started our operations less than 3 years ago and convinced so far 650 paying customers. Our community is greater than 350,000 users in the world, covering every continent. We have today a very wide partners ecosystem. I'm very proud to sit in the middle of our partners from Ingress, Smile, Jasper, and IBM. So I believe it's a good example of our footprint on the market. Our value proposition is flexibility, cost reduction, and performance, which are the message our customers are expecting from us.
All right, thank you. Tom.
Good morning, I think still. My name is Tom Cahill from Jaspersoft. I run the EMEA operation, Europe, Middle East, Africa. Jaspersoft today is, in the world, the most widely deployed business intelligence software. We have in excess of 100,000 production deployments estimated, over 100,000 developers on our jasperforge.com who collaborate on open source community projects. We have in excess of 9,000 commercial customers worldwide. In Europe, we're present now almost 3 years, and we're partnered also with Talent, with Ingress, with Smile. I'm not sure yet about IBM. I know that we work very closely in several projects. All right, I'm not sure about partnership. We believe that the power of business intelligence is to be delivered to users right across the organization. At this time where CIOs are besieged by the requirement for more complex configurations of technology and reporting and analysis needs, we need to specialize, all of us, in delivering better reporting, better analysis capability through simpler user interfaces, but with more open standards and interoperability. And this is where Jaspersoft excels. Like I say, we're the most widely deployed, more than any proprietary or other open source software.
Thank you, Tom. Adam.
Thank you. My name's Adam Jollins. I'm Linux and Open Source Strategy Manager with IBM. IBM has got a broad portfolio, as you know, across hardware, software, and services, but we're also very strong supporters of open source. Really, for one of the reasons is, as Roger says, we see an immense amount of collaborative innovation happening there. We've got hundreds of engineers and programmers working on open source projects as part of the open source community, where we're involved in something like 150 different open source projects, especially around Linux, Apache, and Eclipse.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to jump right into the first question, and coming back to Adam here. So in the press, with the recent acquisitions of some prominent open source companies, of VMware acquiring Spring, Citrix acquiring Zen, and so on, the press is saying that now makes VMware and Citrix and even Oracle potentially open source companies. So Adam, if that is the case, does that mean that IBM is an open source company? Are you an open source company? And does that matter?
So I think being an open source company is about the culture. It's about your approach. It's about whether you're supporting community innovation, collaborative innovation, sharing the development. I think that's the sort of the aspect on that. We've certainly got a number of key open source projects. You could argue that Google is a very big open source company, the amount of investment they put into that. There's obviously pure open source companies like Red Hat, but we're also seeing the hybrid companies come through. So in that sense, yeah, we're an open source company.
Okay, thank you. So Roger, would you agree with that? Would you agree that IBM is an open source company? Is Oracle potentially an open source company?
And I should say I worked for IBM for 14 years, mostly in Europe. I think we have to distinguish between companies that use open source in their products and services, which really is everyone in the IT industry. I really think we'd be struggling to find a single company that doesn't use open source in some aspect of its product or services. So there's companies that exploit open source, and there are companies that are committed to open source. And I think, having been a customer for many years, a key differentiator is the company's critical product and service available under an open source license. If it's not, then as a customer, you're locked in to that company. And IBM has made some very meaningful contributions to the open source movement over many years. It's provided important support for Linux, for Eclipse. We work together on the Eclipse board with open source. But the bottom line is, Steve Mills, who runs the software business there, when I buy his software in my former role, I'm locked in. I don't have access to the source code, and he can raise prices on me at will because I'm locked in to his proprietary product. So I think we shouldn't get too confused between technology companies that are exploiting open source just as a component and companies that are committed to open source.
Thank you, Roger. Patrice, you're a services company primarily. So would you call, what do you think about Oracle's acquisition of Sun and MySQL? Would you call them potentially an open source company? What does that mean to you?
Mostly my feeling is we shall see. That remains to be seen. All of these, as you said, all of these acquisitions are fairly recent, and it remains to be seen whether Oracle will try to thwart the MySQL customer base and bring them to Oracle, or on the contrary, make it thrive and invest in it. And the same goes for Microsoft. Making a big announcement of its new love for open source. I say when they'll have opened, let's say, over 1 million lines of code, truly open, then it'll get serious. But when it's press releases, it's not very serious so far.
Okay. So, Tom, is Jasper today a fully open source company? Obviously, you were a proprietary software company, now are an open source company. Do you see any of these other large vendors, like will Citrix go the route of Jasper and become a true open source company? What does it mean to be one?
What it means to be, I would echo what Roger said, what it means to be an open source company is to be committed to the community that is engaged in the open source projects. The community is developing the software, the community is using the software and providing that software for all others to use freely. So that's what it means to be an open source company. Now, for Jaspersoft, we take a very particular interest in our community. And so what we do is we offer direction. We get engaged. Some of the Jaspersoft developers and architects are the most active in the Jasper Forge and general software, open source software communities. So that's our commitment to it. We do more on our Forge than anybody else does. We may be overtaken from time to time, but generally that's the case. That is what being an open source company is all about.
So by that definition, then, you would actually include IBM, because they probably contribute vastly more than you do to the open source from a pure lines of code perspective.
I think I'd still probably side with Roger on that and say our IBM's key architects, our IBM's developers, more active in the community than others on those projects. That's really the defining moment. I think that if you're really leading in the community that is driving your open source development projects, then perhaps you probably do warrant a closer definition of open source.
Okay. So, Francois, you get a tough one here, and don't worry, I'll ask everybody the same question. But throughout the day, we've heard that from Michael Tiemann to Larry to Roger, we're talking about the issue of vendor lock-in, and that open source either eliminates or reduces vendor lock-in. Are you saying that as an open source company, you don't want your customers locked into your product?
Yes, absolutely. We are a company, and as any company, we need to make revenue, but we're putting ourselves in a situation where we are forced to deliver more and more consistent and a good level of service to the customers. Any customer buying from us buys a subscription which provides support, indemnification, and features. I don't want to be too technical or specific to that words, but what customers buy from us is a solution to their own issues and problems to be solved. They don't buy open source. We're putting ourselves in a situation where they can exit from our services and products because that's the way our contracts are built, because we're committed to the standard, because we provide open source code, we provide open data repositories. Anyone could exit from our solutions. So from this perspective, yes, there is no lock-in if you buy from an open source player like we are. I will not be mentioning all the other companies, but as far talent is considered, yes, we don't lock our customers with our solutions.
Okay. I'll ask this, Roger. If there's no vendor lock-in, what is your predictable financial model?
Well, it's a matter of delivering value, and it's predictable because our customers are running critical applications on Ingress, and so long as we continue to provide value, we will have a predictable revenue stream. That may be different from maybe Oracle's model, where they may not care about what level of support they provide because they know that the customer is locked in because they have to license the software. And let me just give a couple of examples. Here in Europe, we have partners who are running funds transfer for 200 Swiss banks on a combination of Ingress, Red Hat JBoss, and Red Hat Linux. They are trading 160 billion Swiss francs a day on an open source stack. I think it's pretty predictable that they will pay for support for that application. You wouldn't want to stop the Swiss banking system because you weren't paying for a support contract. Okay, we have people who are running nuclear power plants on Ingress technology.
So doesn't that make them dependent? And is dependency another word for lock-in?
Actually, it's a very good point. I don't think so. I think that if Ingress stopped providing good support, Ingress the company, for Ingress the technology, because our technology is freely available under a GPL license, if we're not providing value, another company can come and provide support for that code base. It takes some investment, and I think we would have to be messing up to create an opportunity, but that's why the customer really is back in charge. And that's just a totally different experience than people have with companies like Oracle, who in the middle of the worst recession in 70 years have been raising prices while everyone else, whose business is in this fall, I suspect, has been forced to reduce their price. So there's clearly not a free market at work in the world of enterprise software, and the lock-in is a big part of that. I've experienced it on the customer side for many years, and I think the fact that open source, and I think we've missed something so far in this discussion, which is open standards, eliminate lock-in. So you need to have an open source business model to avoid being locked in commercially, to have a strong community out there. But I would also argue that it's very important to have a commitment to open standards in your own organization so that you can switch technologies, even between different open source technologies.
So thank you. That's a good, very, very interesting response. Patrice, as a services company, it's your job to deploy and implement customized support open source applications, right? The more you deploy customized open source applications, the more the customer becomes dependent upon you.
In a way, one thing I'd like to point out about lock-in is that there is a technological lock-in, and on that issue, to be quite honest, open source is not very far from closed source or proprietary software, in the sense that if you've built a large application on a MySQL database, or you deployed an open ERP in your company, or built a few hundred reports based on Jaspersoft, it won't be easy to change. It won't be much easier because the software was open source, to be honest. The question that's more relevant is, who is someone in a position to take advantage of it, and how much leverage does this guy have? And that's where the greatest difference lies. If really the software is used under an open source license, then you are free to keep using it as long as you wish, and not accept the price raise that could be imposed on you. And you will find people around to provide some support, maybe not support as relevant, as strong as the vendor, of course, but you are not locked in a commercial way, even though you're locked in a technical way, to be honest.
So open source reduces vendor lock-in, does not necessarily eliminate it.
Yes, well, it reduces technical lock-in a tiny bit, but not that much. But it almost cancels or strongly reduces commercial lock-in.
Okay, thank you. Adam, what is your perspective on this topic as a hybrid company?
It's a hybrid company. Okay, so I would say that firstly that vendor lock-in isn't a binary thing. It's not either you're completely locked in and you can't move however much you pay, or you're completely not locked in and you can move with zero costs, because clearly moving from one provider to another provider is always going to provide some cost. It's not binary, it's a spectrum. Now, there are a number of things you can do to reduce that to reduce the vendor lock-in. Open standards are one of the things you can do to reduce it. Open source is another thing you can use to reduce it. It doesn't take you all the way, but it's a good contribution in terms of reducing vendor lock-in. I think the other thing that Roger mentioned is that you have to look at vendor lock-in from a customer point of view, not from the vendor point of view. And when you have the choice, right, does the customer stay with you? And that's about customer value, right? That's, are they getting value from you? Are they staying with you because you're delivering them value rather than they're locked in? So I think that's the consideration we see. We want people to come to us, certainly, because they're getting good value from us, rather than because they feel they have to, because you're looking at what's the next sale, and if they got locked in on the first sale, they'll say, do we really want to get locked in on the second sale? So I think it's good from that point of view.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a different perspective, Tom?
I do have a very different perspective. Lock-in isn't at all on a spectrum, in my view. If you're paying a lot of money up front for proprietary software, you're locked in. If you're not paying a lot of money up front for open source software, you're not locked in. It's as simple as that. The open source companies survive because they're providing quality over a period of subscription. A customer is free at any stage to stop using the software, to revert to community version software, or because of open standards, to migrate at much lower cost to another technology. So,
one brief thing to that. What he's talking about here is the license fee you pay up front. And picking up on the point about commercial lock-in, as a CIO, if I go to my chief financial officer and I say, I'm going to do this project and I need to spend $3 million on IBM licensed software, okay? My CFO will then depreciate that over several years. And if I say I'm stopping using it, he will have to write that software off, and I will be in deep trouble because I'll be causing a hit to the P&L. So the commercial lock-in is very real, and these big upfront license payments, I think, are important.
Okay. All right, Francois.
Just to add a final comment on that. One other benefit with open source is you don't have to heavily invest before you get the result. You can download, try, even use, put in production, and when you are convinced the solution you have chosen provides your business the results you're expecting, then you are ready to buy subscriptions which provide support, but you are not forced to spend $500,000 or $2 million initial investments, which becomes a key argument to make it work, even if it doesn't. And then lock-in is not only a technology thing, it's also a commercial and contractual thing.
Okay, thank you. So this is more for the open source companies. I'll start with you, Tom. So if you took out economic conditions, what is the biggest challenge to being a successful commercial open source software vendor, or editor, as they say over here?
I think that the two things that make a very successful open source software company are, number one, I think that I'm going to echo actually what was on slides earlier, and that is, do you have something to sell that people will pay money for? And it's not necessarily that you're going to have to realize that business case, but it has to have proven value. And the second thing is, and not in any particular order, you must support the community. You must grow a ubiquitous proliferation, if you like. It's a bit tautological, pardon me. I hope the interpreters get that. But that's what you must do. And the community really has to be the champion of the software, and you as a company have to be champion of the community. If you combine those two and then put some clever people in charge of the company, you should do well.
Okay, thank you. Francois, how do you, first do you agree with what he said, and then how do you go about supporting your community?
First, I agree with what Tom just said. If you don't provide the value to the users, they won't buy from you. So there are different ways of supporting the community. As far as talent is considered, we offer a wide range of solutions from community-driven support to professional talent-driven support. So if you don't want to invest or pay any services for support, you are free to ask the question to the community, and then you can get answers from any member of the community and even talent, because we are greatly involved in making sure the community gets the answers it wants, it needs. However, there is no SLA, no service level agreement attached to that. The service level agreement, which comes with a guarantee to get an answer on time, a guarantee to have a workaround, a guarantee to have a correction, a guarantee to get value, is something you pay for. And this is the way we provide support to our community and users.
Patrice, how does a services company go about providing value and engaging in the community with some of your partner communities here?
In several ways. So we are talking here mostly about software vendor, open source software, which is one of the categories, and then you get community products and foundation-based products, and each has a different model and different ways to contribute. Regarding the category of software vendors, a lot of products that have been made in the last few years are based on a kernel plus extension model, architectural model, whereby the editor has a stronghold and control on the kernel that needs to be very stable and in the hands of a few developers, and then around this is a wide and very dynamic creation of extensions that in some products may end up being like 2/3 of the actual deployment will be extensions and 1/3 is the kernel. So this is the way that most systems integrators can contribute to this product, is not so much within the kernel, but helping build extensions around the products.
Localization, hooks, connectors, tools, utilities, things like that.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Roger, one of the things, one of the issues that we hear from open source companies is that sometimes their partners, their SIs or channels are their best friends, and sometimes they're also their biggest competitors. How do you manage that?
Yes, I mean, from our perspective, we find that they're really our partners, they're our best friends, and it may vary from company to company. But customers at the end of the day are looking for a solution to a business problem. They don't wake up in the morning saying, I need a database or I need an ETL tool, whatever. They wake up looking for a solution to a business problem. And so the logical place to turn is a systems integrator or maybe an application provider. And so, for example, we put an awful lot of effort in, let's take the Java community, in working with integrators who provide solutions for customers who want Java development. And, across the world, from, Australia through Paris, London through Scandinavia, we partner particularly actually with Red Hat's and the JBoss team so that our systems integrators can go in and provide a complete solution, a complete open source stack to a customer. And what they find, what our partners find, is if they can include a database that is capable of doing really mission critical computing, they have a good chance of in turn being a channel and actually getting paid, and then we get paid for providing a good support subscription. So we really have invested very, very heavily in the relationship with our partners, and our partners are winning business. Just yesterday I was hearing an update on a major vehicle licensing system in Germany, which has moved from Oracle to Ingress, and they're rolling out in a couple of different states in Germany. And our software partner is seeing a happy customer and a lower cost and a higher margin. So lower cost to the customer, higher margin to our partner. And I think these are relationships that we have to get right as open source companies.
Okay, thank you. So Adam, one of the knocks on IBM is that IBM represents a huge potential partner opportunity, but sometimes it takes 1, 2, 3 years to realize that, to build the relationship with IBM. Is that the same for open source companies who want to partner with IBM? Does it take that level of investment to see the return?
I don't know it does take that long to see the return. I think it's, obviously we're keen to partner. We have a very broad business partner community that we're working with. I don't know there's any particular difference in that sense between open source companies and traditional companies, except that we're seeing open source companies move faster in terms of generating the code, faster in terms of developing the innovations, typically because of the development process.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to go back. I wanted to actually ask each one of you, what is the single biggest challenge for growing your business today in Europe?
The concept of Europe is perhaps one big challenge. Par exemple, ici en France, c'est vraiment pas l'Europe, c'est la France. Vraiment, il y a des verticales qui sont très très spécifiques. Ils n'ont rien à faire avec les verticales en Allemagne, par exemple. And that's really, really the biggest challenge. But it's also the biggest opportunity. I think that the collaboration that's taking place here, for instance, in Paris, is actually feeding back into our community, back into Jaspersoft, back into the open source movement generally. And that's, on the one hand, a challenge, but on the other hand, I think it's an even bigger opportunity.
Oh, by the way, you can't actually say the exact same thing the previous person. You have to come up with something new. So what's a different challenge that you face in growing your business here?
You know, Tom is from Ireland, I'm from France, so this is Europe, Tom. But yeah, I will not say there is any specific challenge to the open source to grow our business. At the end of the day, for a customer, open source doesn't change nothing than solving a business issue. So if you consider that from a business angle, as a company, how do I go to the market and how do I convince the customers that they should put money into my services is just the classical question any business team should think about when trying to sell his product to the market. We need to stick on our core business, what is the value we provide, and how do we sell that to the customers. The experience we have in France, Benelux, UK, and Germany just shows us that we just need to execute properly the way we sell our solutions to the customers. And if we stick to this basic concept of selling our value, there is no challenge, or I should say, no different challenge than selling a commercial package. It is just execution, as anything in any business, I believe.
Okay, and Patrice, I'll come back to you. But Roger, would you agree with that selling open source solutions is almost identical to selling proprietary software solutions?
Well, I think that there's some element of truth in that with regard to developing partnerships in different countries. We talked earlier about how important it is to partner with systems integrators and software providers, and they often are specific to different geographies and different languages. And as a company, you need to invest in local teams. You know, here in France, in Germany, in Benelux, in Scandinavia, it's an investment to develop those relationships. So those are things that I feel are sort of company specific. On the other hand, you know, open source at one level works globally from the day one. You know, if you look at our development community, for example, all the different communities we have, they see no boundaries, right? So we have a community that works on geospatial, so location-based services for databases. We were founders of this, and it spans, you know, PhD and postgraduate computer science people in Beijing, through some of the best minds in Google in California, through Canada and all around the world. So there are some things that really scale globally, but I think the things that you need to invest in each country are more the commercial aspects, and specifically to do with partners and understanding on the government side what the government policies are in each country.
Patrice, how do you find it? How would you answer that same question here? What's the most difficult issue?
I think for an IT provider, it's even the country boundaries are even more difficult to cross, and indeed that's one of the challenges to us. No doubt that if we had started Smiles in some, say in Massachusetts, we would have grown out of Massachusetts much faster than we can grow out of France and into Europe today. And it's more difficult because good products, they travel very fast and the world spreads. And actually, that's, if you want to be really cynical, that's the big deal underlying open source software vendor business models is exchanging free marketing, worldwide free marketing at a huge scale against a little or a lot of open source code given out. So that works pretty well for open source products, even much better when they are very good products, of course. But there is no such thing for systems integrators. So we nobody has heard about Smile, say, in Poland, while everybody knows Jaspersoft, including in Poland and in Brazil.
Okay. Thank you. So, and this would be for Francois and Tom. Are you seeing direct customer opportunities being driven from your community activities here in Europe? That's a very well-established route in North America. Is there a corollary here, or is it more through your channel partners?
It's a combination. It's really a win-win situation. In the classical software model, you have the choice between direct or indirect. With the open source, the great thing is it's a mix of everything. Lots of our users start from the community. They download, they use, they try, they get convinced or not yet, but they have a first understanding that we could solve the issues they're facing. But when it comes the time to solve the business issue, the technology itself is really not enough. You need skilled people, you need business specialists, and you need resources. And at that time, the system integrator is a key part of the combination. So it's really difficult to say how much business is driven from the community or how much is it from the system integrators. We experience that more than 1/3 of our current business come from system integrators. But is that customers who didn't know about Talent before buying with Smile? I will not say that. It's a mix of all these different sources, and that's the real benefit of the community. We could not succeed without the system integrators. Customers could not succeed without the system integrators, but system integrators could not succeed without the customers and the open source vendors. So it's a combination.
Okay. Roger?
Yeah, I just want to make a point that one of the benefits of the community model is that the technology really gets driven from the community, from the actual user. Whereas in proprietary software companies, you have people whose job it is to dream up 100 features to sell you a new license. And the 100 features all add cost and complexity and sure as hell make you pay a big new license, but they may not actually be what you need, right? And so what I like is that out of the Ingress community, we see new things coming up because people really want them. And here in France, we have a group of folks who don't like the direction of MySQL or whatever's going to happen to MySQL. They want to use Ingress. They're big PHP users. And they said, you know what? We want to have something that makes it really easy to use Ingress and PHP. And all of a sudden, we have this new thing called Easy Ingress. Just came out of the community, right? And then we say, we should pay more attention to the PHP community because clearly they like Ingress, right? So I think that that accelerates innovation because you don't have long product cycles where people in gray suits do surveys and try and work out whether the customer really wants it. If someone wants to put their hands to work and create something, it's a strong vote for a particular capability.
Thank you. I saw you pointing at Adam. I'll get to you, Tom, but I saw you pointing at Adam, and I think he wants to reply.
Okay. So I think that's true to some extent, but I think we also need to look at who's doing the innovation and one of the risks in terms of the open source community is that somebody who's doing a lot of technical work say, hey, this is a really cool technical feature, we're going to implement this really cool technical feature, which doesn't particularly have any benefit from a user point of view. So you need to, whichever method of development you're using, you need to have a very clear connection between the users of the product and the people who are then developing the code. So it's not code for its own sake, it's code that helps solve a customer problem. And there's different ways in proprietary companies, different ways in open source companies you do that, but it comes down to you need to be regularly getting beaten up by the customer in terms of we need these features, and you need to have that loop in terms of the process.
I guess my point was that if a user has written code, then you've got a really strong vote that they want the result. It doesn't. I mean, I'm not saying that every one of our users writes code. That's not at all the case. But you do get contributions from the development community, as well as contributions like the VectorWise stuff from leading researchers. And it's just I think a stronger feedback loop when someone has actually voted with their fingers and done some work.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I wanted you to reflect on what Francois was saying earlier about the nature of are you able to drive real customer opportunities from the community, or does it come from elsewhere? particularly here in Europe?
Actually, I'm going to attempt to address both points, but make it very simple and straightforward. I'm thinking of three perspectives that people might find useful. Firstly, if you think of an investor thinks of monetizing the value already in the community of free open source software users. So that's an investor. That's how an investor thinks. A sales manager thinks direct, indirect. So we have to sell through our channel. We have to enable our resellers. We have to get our sales teams operating. So that's the second perspective. But actually the perspective that's most important is how does the community of free open source software users and developers interact with the company, and how in turn does the company interact with, we call them professional software users. And it's a very clean circle. If you're a pure open source company, in other words, a company that is dedicated to developing first-class open source software, you're listening to your paying customers, because they're paying you, in order to drive the development in your community, because that's your interest, is driving the development and directing development in your community as a very active community activist, in order to bring benefit to all. And that's the kind of circle, and that's the perspective, I think, which is most enamoring, if you like, about the open source movement. Because all of the benefits trickle through, and they're driven obviously by commercial need, but also by community-based need.
Okay, well, thank you.